Day two, people will have different pronouns beyond he or she or even they, which, I use in a singular context for myself. But as you can see, there's an ongoing evolution of language and how people can identify. If you're unsure how to use someone's pronouns after that person has disclosed what their pronouns are, just ask, clarify. I just want to make sure that I'm using your pronouns in the correct way.
Do you know what XIE?
So you say Z.
Z?
Mm-hmm.
But then there is a Z, right?
No answer.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Now nobody knows what nothing means. Nobody knows what anything means.
Well,
how
that's
do you define a female?
someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing, when you're a female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies, we could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's down in.
I want to get into this Dr. Phil interview, and I want to just do a little reaction to some of the foolishness and some of the really bad points that are being made by people on the trans side of the argument. Now, keep in mind, I have no hate towards anybody. I have no hate towards trans people at all. I have no hate towards anyone in the LGBT community. Whatever you want to do, your body in your own bed, you knock yourself out. You're an adult, you do it. However, politically, I disagree with you wholeheartedly. So let me get this video together.
New Dr. Phil, the dispute over gender pronouns.
I don't identify exclusively with being a man or a woman. I use they and them as my pronouns.
You don't get your own pronouns.
You think it's a delusion.
In school, our kids are being asked what their pronoun is.
This is a war on gender.
Babies are babies without a known sex.
When they were born, we did not assign a sex.
You think it's toxic to label the child one way or the other. Well, I have a question. Raise your hand if you have heard of gender pronouns such as he, she, or they, and Z or V. Raise your hand.
This is where we've gotten. Stay tuned, we're gonna get into this.
And if you're confused about how to use them in today's social climate. Yeah. I'm asking these questions because approximately 1.2 million people in the U.S. identify as non-binary, meaning they don't identify as she or he, but they and other pronouns. Now, as society's attitudes about gender are continuously evolving, the practice of specifying one's pronouns is relatively new. Now, I just want to say, I don't have all the answers, not even close.
No shit, Dr. Phil.
But I'm totally open to learning, and I want this to be a safe place to talk about and learn. But not every person is on board with this new movement. Half of Americans say they feel very or somewhat comfortable using gender-neutral pronouns, while 48% say they feel very or somewhat uncomfortable using them. Now, this growing debate regarding the use of pronouns has this country pretty divided. Take a look.
Controversy tonight over a new policy on how gender identity is addressed.
You may notice it at the bottom of your emails or in Zoom meetings, the listing of pronouns next to someone's.
All right, let's speed this up a little bit.
Pronouns are a big topic of.
So these are the first two people on the panel. I believe this is a transgender man who is with a female-like partner.
Conversation that cannot and should not be ignored. And my first guests, Addison and Ethan, have a lot to say.
I'm Addison.
And I'm Ethan.
We've been together for about
5 years.
And married
for 3 years.
I use they, them pronouns. Being non-binary just means that I just don't identify with the gender I was assigned at birth, and I don't identify exclusively with being a man or woman. I'm something.
Now look at this. So I respect everybody's decision to be who they want to be. But this right here sums up the issue that most people have with this being promoted to children. I don't want my kids growing up in a world where gender is over. In the way I view things and the way most logical people view things is gender is the fabric of our society. That's how we carry on as a human race. But this person says gender is over. Granted, they've created 52 different genders. I'll continue.
In between, outside of that binary.
My pronouns are he or they. I also identify as a non-binary. To me, being a non-binary means having the sense of freedom to explore my gender in whichever way I want. I don't have to perform or pretend to be someone I'm not. I can be my authentic self.
It's really important for us.
Imagine say it could be our authentic self. Ooh.
To share more information with people because people are curious and they want to understand, but sometimes they don't always have the opportunities to do that.
Welcome.
Hi.
You were watching the tape piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a hot topic.
Yes.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is it a good thing?
I guess because it creates dialogue and it invites conversation to learn about other people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really confused about gender identity in these times, and it's good for us to have these conversations so people open their minds and relearn and unlearn to what we've been taught.
Right.
Relearn and unlearn. So we're supposed to unlearn the basic fabric of life to relearn your way of life and then adapt that and make that everyone's way of life. You see, the problem I have with this is that it's funny that they call out everyone else for being these horrible people just for not agreeing with them. However, how can I agree with you if you want to make your newly found way of life in your own mind my way of life, when I don't want that to be my way of life? You can have your way of life, but why do I have to unlearn what my way of life is to do your way of life? Why do I have to do that?
Right. And Addison, many people think gender pronouns are exclusive to the LGBTQ plus community, but that
it is exclusive to that community because they adopt that. It's not exclusive to my community.
That's a misconception, true?
Yeah. Well, everybody has pronouns. Like, you may use he and him as your pronouns, right? I use they and them as my pronouns. We all may have a certain gender pronoun too, but I think it's important for people to understand that for trans and non-binary people, we often change our pronouns to reflect who we are when we come out and be who we are.
I'll continue.
How do you explain the difference between sex and gender?
I consider sex to be our biological makeup. Our chromosomes, our hormones, our genitals is a biological makeup. But our gender is more of an internal sense. So think of it like this. Sex is...
That's not true. Your gender is not an internal sense. Your gender is the word that describes what you are as a human. Okay? Let's say we have a female dog and a male dog. I wouldn't call a male dog a man, and I wouldn't call a female dog a woman. I would call a male human a man and a female human a woman, because that is the word that specifically describes the species. Human beings have the luxury and the brain power to have created language to better describe our experience on the planet. This is something that no other species has. And you're going to take that to put it in your own extreme way of explaining the way you feel. So we're supposed to take on the way you feel and ascribe that to the whole entire species, No, I'm not rocking with that.
This is what's between the legs, and gender is what's between the ears, right? It's how we see ourselves on the inside.
Okay. And that's something somebody can't know. Gender is something somebody can't know just by looking at somebody.
Nope, yeah. Because everyone is going to present and express themselves in a different way. I know, it's very confusing, right? Everyone's like, what is going on? But it's really, about us...
Yeah, it's confusing as fuck.
Breaking that assumption that we can tell someone's identity, someone's story, their pronouns, even their name, just based on how they look, right?
Yeah. And so how does someone ask? How does somebody clarify that? Ethan, what's the best way? What's the most comfortable way?
I think for me, to create a safe space for people to share their pronouns, I will say, hi, my name is Ethan. I use he or they pronouns. What about you?
I think it's really important for us to recognize other people's pronouns because, again, we can't make that assumption. But for so many people who are cisgender, meaning that you do identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth, you're not transgender or not non-binary, I think a lot of people don't even question their pronouns because we already use them and it's already assumed correctly. Mm-hmm. But for so many trans and non-binary people, that isn't often assumed correctly. So we need to take the time to get to know people.
Cisgender, it says adjective that describes a person.
You see, that's the flaw here. See, human beings don't have the time, space, or energy to sit up and get to know people, as he says. The reason why things are made simple, man, woman, because it's an easy way to describe the person that you were looking at. It's an easy way. It makes things really simple. Doesn't make things difficult. Now, they are suggesting that I have to go through a mental Rolodex and think of 52 different ways to give this person a pronoun when it was already made simple. He for him, man, male. She for her, woman, female. Simple.
Whose gender identity matches or aligns with the gender he or she was assigned at birth. Now, this would be what has been traditional for...
And let me stop it right here. Listen, however people want to live their life, go on and do it. I'm not here to judge you based on that. The problem that I have with this particular dialogue and the way they are coming off, and when I say they, I'm talking about the two of them, not them with the long hair and the beard. See how confusing that is? What I'm saying is, if this is the way you want to live, build your own cult, build your own religion, whatever you want to do, section off yourself in society and have this world where you guys can do that. But don't put that on the rest of the world just because this is what you have in your head. I respect what's in your mind. I respect it. But at the same time, I'm not going to go out of my way to teach my kids all of this other shit just because you say this is what it is. This is some new shit. This is some brand new shit that they just came up with, and we're supposed to just adapt it because they just came up with it. Yo, I'll keep going though.
Centuries, right? Mm-hmm. Why does it need a term?
You know, if we don't use that term, then we end up saying maybe real men or normal men or regular men, right? Or we just say men, and then we say maybe transgender men, right? And the thing is that we need to realize that trans women are women, trans men are men too. And so we just want to have a term for that privilege, that assumption that you're...
You see, there's no logic, research, or actual definition behind what he's saying. It's basically like, however you feel, we're just supposed to rock with it. No, it doesn't work like that. This is why I get frustrated when I get into debates with people about these topics, because normally when I'm having a disagreement with someone about what these two particular people are talking about, is that they don't present any facts. They just basically dictate to you a new definition that everyone hasn't agreed on. They just dictate it to you. Trans women are women. Okay. When did you come up with that? When did we vote on that? I just got to believe that because that's what you believe? Nah, no. Some people believe in, you know what? I'm just going to play the video. I'm not going to get that deep into it right now.
Or gender identity is going to match the one that you were assigned at birth.
All right, and then transgender, adjective, describes a person whose gender identity does not match or align with the gender they were assigned at birth.
Keyword, does not match.
Birth. And then non-binary describes a person whose gender identity does not fit into the traditional binary of man or woman. And that term can be abbreviated to, and how do you pronounce that?
NB.
NB.
NB, yeah.
Okay. And
did they just make up a word? NB. NB. That's a made up word. Now, I'm going to have to do some research later to make sure. NB. Dr. Phil's a doctor and didn't even know what that fucking word meant.
Explain that.
For transgender people, we are assigned a sex at birth. And when we grow up, you know, when there's a mismatch of how we view ourselves and how society views us, then we can choose to, you know, either medically transition or just socially transition or both.
Medically transition, socially transition, or both. I'm gonna rewind what he said.
Transgender men, right? And the thing.
All right, and then transgender, adjective, describes a person whose binary of.
Yeah.
Okay, and explain that.
For transgender people, we are assigned a sex at birth. And when we grow up, you know, when there's a mismatch of how we view ourselves and how society views us, then we can choose to, you know, either medically transition or just socially transition or both. Not every transgender person chooses to medically transition. For me, I chose to medically transition to feel comfortable in my own skin.
Mm-hmm. And this is different from, you know, being...
So you chose to medically transition to feel comfortable in the biological skin that you were given prior to birth and then at birth. So you disagree with what the chemical biological transaction that happened between your parents. You disagree with this. So you're going to take medication or just convince yourself that you're not what you actually are. Have no problem with that. Do you? But once again, you're telling me that I need to teach this to my children. No, sir. Or yes, no, sir to him. And no, I don't know the proper thing to say to them or they, but you get my drift. That doesn't work.
Non-binary and stuff too, because for many non-binary people, they might identify as trans because they don't identify with that gender assigned at birth.
Right.
But for a lot of non-binary people, it means that you just don't exclusively identify as a man or woman. And under that, there's a whole umbrella of gender identities where people might have pronouns that change day to day.
So not only do you disagree with how you were biologically made up, according to you, you can change it day by day. Now, if a person, let's leave gender out of it. If a person changed their identity based on their name every single day and their name and who they are in the world other than gender, you would diagnose them as a schizophrenic and put them in a mental institution. But somehow, when gender is involved, hear me out. I'm not here to bash anyone. I'm just here to make logical assertions. Somehow it's not a mental issue when it comes to you changing your pronoun day to day whenever you feel like it. And the rest of us are supposed to sit up and say, yep, yep, change this pronoun. All right, let's continue.
There might be people who have one set of pronouns for the rest of their life. You might have non-binary people too who are fluid with their gender identities in itself. It's very confusing, very nuanced, but
why make this confusing? Why not just identify with what you actually are? It's a free country. You don't have to do that. You have the right to identify with what you want to identify with. But like they just said, it's very confusing. Why?
But I think that what you were talking about earlier, with it being that maybe traditionally, for centuries, people have identified with maybe the gender that they were assigned at birth. When we look at history and we look at cultures too around the world, we see that third, fourth, fifth genders have always been around. And then in different cultures, the idea—
Where? Give us an example. We won't get one.
idea of what gender is or a relation to our bodies is completely different than maybe here in the United States.
I have a gender pronoun chart that I got really confused about, and I'm just admitting straight up, this chart, I didn't know how to use the chart, and we don't need.
Look at this chart. This is the newly constructed gender pronoun chart. Look at this. Some of these words ain't even words. M, N, co, cos, self, N self, M self. HIR, hear self, yo self, yo's. Z, zeers. What the dude, what are we talking about? I'll be fair. Let's let them explain.
To go through the whole thing, but there were like just using co.
Not all these pronouns I think I even recognize too, which is okay, right? I think at the end of the day too, people will have different pronouns beyond he or she or even they, which, I use in a singular context for myself. But as you can see, there's an ongoing evolution of language and how people can identify. If you're unsure how to use someone's pronouns after that person has disclosed what their pronouns are, just ask, clarify. I just want to make sure that I'm using your pronouns in the correct way.
Do you know what XIE?
So you say Z.
Z? Mm-hmm. But then there is a Z, right?
Let's go back for 1 second and listen to Dr. Phil. Oh my God, this is hilarious.
I'm using your pronouns in the correct way.
Do you know what XIE?
So you say Z.
Z?
Mm-hmm.
But then there is a Z right below.
Z. Yo. Z.
Mm-hmm. There's different ways to spell and pronounce pronouns. It's complicated and nuanced, but it's important for us.
Save the children.
To understand that complexity.
My next guest has been criticized online for his views about gender identity. His reply may surprise you. That's next.
You don't get your own pronouns.
So you think it's a delusion if they decide that they're different than they were biologically created?
Yeah, I think it's delusion. It could be mental illness. My name is Matt Walsh, and I've written a book called Johnny the Walrus. This book is about identity and imagination. He identifies as a walrus, and his mom's a little silly. She takes it seriously and thinks he really is a walrus. So she went on her phone, and there were people telling her that this isn't pretend, he's really a walrus. And his mother takes him to the doctor to have him surgically transitioned, and gets him walrus hormone pills.
Now, granted, I don't know very much about this guy, right? But I can say, when it comes to this issue, he's spot on. Now, from what a few people have told me, they say he's a far-right extremist. I don't know much more of his work beyond what I've seen here. But I can say, I really don't care what else he believes in regards to whatever else he may say when it comes to this topic here. As far as I'm concerned, he's spot on. It's the same thing.
And then eventually tries to drop him off at a zoo to live with other walruses. Not only topping the Amazon charts, my book has taken the world by storm.
Well, you just saw my next guest, author and conservative host of Daily Wire's The Matt Walsh Show, talking about his recently published children's book that has since been removed online by a popular large retail chain. Now, Matt says gender is not a social...
The agenda is real. The agenda is real.
...construct, but rooted firmly in biology. True?
True, absolutely. Well, actually, just to clarify, and with all due respect, but most of what we just heard in the previous segment was total nonsense, which is why when you were pushing for definitions and that sort of thing, they were not able to provide it because it's just nonsensical. Sex, well, as human beings, we have a sex, male or female. That is a biological scientific fact. Now, gender is a linguistic term. Words have gender. People don't.
You're saying that there should be no construct of gender, just sex. You're either male or female.
Right.
And someone feeling in a mental, emotional way that they don't identify with the sex that they have been biologically created as and assigned at birth based on their genitalia. If they don't feel that way, that...
If I haven't said it already, fair use, fair use, fair use. We are playing this video under the Fair Use Act. Thank you.
There's no construct that describes that, experiences that.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the reality. So you can feel however you want. I mean, I could sit here and say that I feel like a tomato plant, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually in those things. So you're... your self-perception, you can have whatever self-perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self-perception or to take part in this kind of charade, this theatrical production. You don't get your own pronouns, just like you don't get your own prepositions or your own adjectives. You know, it's like if I were to tell you, my adjectives are handsome and brilliant, and whenever you're talking about me, you have to describe me as handsome and brilliant because that's how I identify. It makes no sense. You don't get your own pronouns. That's grammar. That's language.
So you think it's a delusion? Someone is self-delusional?
Yeah, I think it's delusion. It could be mental illness. It could be it's a lot of different things. With children, wow. You know, there's also just a basic confusion that all kids have. Like that's why when you hear a parent say, "Oh, my 4-year-old son came to me and said that I'm a girl now, and so that's what I'm gonna raise him as a girl." No, you're 4-year-old. I have 4 kids. When a 4-year-old boy comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm a girl," here's a good follow-up question. What is a girl?
Good fucking gracious, dude.
Hey, I don't shine shoes anymore.
I'm just saying.
Ask him what he means by that. What do you mean by girl? And when you ask him that, here's what he'll tell you. He will tell you what he really means is that he wants to do some of the things that girls do, like play with the dollhouse, or you know, he likes the color pink.
My son ain't playing with no dollhouse. He can choose to when he's 18, but not under my roof. But that's how I choose to raise my family.
That's fine. Play with the dollhouse, but you're still a boy. Mm-hmm. That's a question I would like to throw out to other members of the panel. Actually, because just like the 4-year-old can't answer what is a girl, well, this is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology is that no one who espouses it can even tell you what these words mean. Like, what is a woman? Well, can you tell me what a woman?
Now look, watch this, and look at the face. Look at them's face. Them is like, now watch the non-point that comes out of them's mouth. It's raining men. Hallelujah. I had to do that to himself.
Woman is?
No, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for everybody.
No answer.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Now nobody knows what nothing means. Nobody knows what anything means.
Well,
how do you define a
female? Someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing, when you're female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies, we could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's down in. It's ingrained in every fiber of their being.
Interesting. So I'm trying to understand. Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female, you said, right?
Correct, is a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? Cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, but maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce. Maybe doesn't have.
That's a horrible point. If you're a female and you're born with the ability, without the ability to reproduce, that's called a birth defect. There's a deficiency somewhere that didn't give you the ability to produce. You could have been born with a disease. You could have had unhealthy lifestyle choices that got you to that point. It could have been something underlying that you never caught. Like there's a whole lot of things that could have happened with that. So for that even to be them's next point makes no sense. See, they can't argue back with any logical, so they ask you these questions to drag you into this gray area, right? That's important. You can't let people, and this is in any argument, don't let people drag you into a gray area where they have you arguing back and forth and over nothing, right? Because the main point is the main point. But these gray areas, they drag you into these gray areas. They have you arguing back and forth over nothing, right? And then once they drag you down the hole of nothing, then you start arguing over semantics. They wait for you to say something grammatically incorrect, and then they attack you for that, right? But the point is the point. The point is the point. Don't get dragged into gray areas. That's why I like this. As far as this conversation goes, I think this guy, Mr. Walsh, handled it correctly because he didn't go for the gray area shit. He kept that shit to the facts and asked direct questions that they never answered. They just danced around them and just made up their own points. And then when their own points didn't work, they just started throwing shit at the wall to see if it would stick.
Have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just like Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not myself.
You used the word, so what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right. So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term.
I don't give a fuck. Ladies, what you're gonna have to understand is that comment he made just right there is what's gonna be the end of womanhood as you know it. That's dangerous. Look at how they're using womanhood.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
They're using womanhood, right, as this umbrella term, as them just stated, right? Them just stated that. Think about it. One day you might get into a domestic dispute, right? And it's going to be a time where you get into a domestic dispute. And typically how it goes in court, man hits a woman, man goes to jail. Man not supposed to hit woman, right? Police show up, man says, no, I'm not a man. I'm a woman. I identify as a woman. Is it still a domestic dispute? Or is it just an altercation between two women? How does this really work? Where are we going? Where are we going here? Now we'll get deeper into that conversation with the next set of examples. But ultimately, like, ladies, when you support this type of rhetoric, you don't understand that you're taking the rug right from under your own self. You're taking the rug right from under your own self. You're shooting yourself in the foot supporting this rhetoric, because one day, matter of fact, it ain't even one day, it's happening now. The main topic of the night, the swimmer Leah Thomas, also known as William, beating the dog shit out of women on the 6'4", swimming circles around all the women in y'all sport. He just gonna take it. Because he couldn't, as a man, he couldn't compete. But as a woman, it's nothing. Because womanhood is an umbrella. It's an umbrella, right? I'm going to replay that.
It includes people
that
who
describes
maybe doesn't have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not
but
myself.
You used the word, so what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right. So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
It includes people
that describes what?
People who identify as a woman.
Identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity.
They're using you.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
And define it differently.
That doesn't,
and so trans women are women too.
Okay.
And you want
and look at the robots clapping in the background. Look at the robots clapping it. What them just said, and if you're tuning in late, I'm saying them because that's the pronoun that they or them wants to be called. That's why I'm calling them.
Trans women are women. You won't even tell me what the word means, though. So that's the problem.
Women. You
won't even tell me what the word means. And them still won't do it.
Reduce men down to maybe just their genetics, our genitals, our chromosomes, right? That's what you're saying.
You want to do is
that's what
you want to do is appropriate women. You want to appropriate womanhood.
Okay.
And turn it into basically a costume. That can be worn. We've got when we've. Hey, it's real funny. It's real funny. It's real funny when you're.
Should look like. Right. So, man, you're literally saying this is what a woman is.
Yeah. Well,
isn't that a little sexist?
Because I am willing to define it, but you won't.
Hang on. We've heard how Matt feels about pronouns.
But
my
anymore.
next guest says those who oppose them are asking the wrong questions. What does she say are the right ones? We'll add her to the conversation when we come back.
Now watch this next guest. This is a feminist professor from Kent State University who has some bullshit-ass PhD in nothingness that is going to attempt to come into conversation and try to, I don't know what she's going to try to do. Now, if you watch this clip closely when she starts talking, look at the way it's edited, right? You can tell a lot of what she said was cut off because it probably didn't make any sense. And the Dr. Phil show tried to put them in the best light. But this is every point that the people are making on the left side of the screen is just bad. They're going to have 3 different people against this one guy, and none of them can disprove anything he's saying. They're just coming back with feelings and made up terms and words and also made up ideologies to try to combat him. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Let's continue.
You can laugh all you want, but this is a logical problem. You are conflating sex and gender.
There's biological sex, and then there is gender identity. Part of me wants to ask why you care so much.
Some people go by he. Some people actually use the pronoun they.
I'm not a she. I'm not a he either. It's really about what sort of feels good to our ears when we hear it.
Liberals. One more time, can we get Grounds Creeper Willie for the liberals?
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
All right, let's go.
To use pronouns that do not apply to biological sex.
Pronouns are important because they indicate a degree of respect.
You can avoid mistakes by just saying them, theirs, they.
If you're unsure about somebody's pronoun, ask, hey, what are your pronouns?
There goes a black woman.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
Cannot force people to call you what you want to be called.
Their gender is still valid regardless of whether or not you understand it.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
I love that clip for some reason.
Well, we've been talking about the great gender pronoun debate that has the country divided, just almost 50-50. Last segment, Matt made his case against people using what are called their own pronouns. But my next guest says the opposition is taking the wrong approach. Joining us on stage is Dr. Susie Denbo, Associate Professor at Kent State University with a PhD in
I'm a PhD. Shout out to Kevin Samuels. I'm a PhD.
Communications and expertise in gender, sex, and feminism. The wrong approach. Joining us on stage.
I have to listen to that degree again. Oh, I mean, like, the level of bullshit is heavy right now. One more time for the feminist professor.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
Is Dr. Susie Denbo, Associate Professor at Kent State University with a PhD in Communications and expertise in gender, sex, and feminism. Now, Kent State has been recognized among the nation's most LGBTQ plus friendly universities. Now, doctor, thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
You've been listening to everything.
Let's go back. Let's.
Are taking the wrong approach in this conversation.
I think there's.
Let's just take a moment of silence to look at this professor. She looks like she used to be what do you call the women that used to hang out with the rock bands? A groupie for like Motley Crue or fucking no. She looks a little younger than that. Maybe a groupie for Guns N' Roses. This woman is an associate professor at Kent State. Now let's see if she can come up with some good points. I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but it's the life we live.
There's the extreme approach that you are admittedly taking. And then there's also just ordinary people.
An extreme approach. He's asking logical questions and no one's answering them, but he's taking an extreme approach.
People that might not be comfortable with the language change. And it just is awkward. And so they're afraid of not being.
Dr. Susie Diembo. Is that like a Nigerian last name or something? Diembo.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
Being courteous or being accepting. So there's like these two things. There's actually combating and not being, you don't like transgender, the idea of transgender. That's different than pronouns. But then just for most people, it's just feeling a little bit awkward and unsure and not wanting to hurt or offend somebody.
Well, why is it important for educators to teach about gender identity, gender presentation, and pronouns? Why do you think that's important?
Because there is a difference. There is biological sex, and a lot of times people are conflating sex and gender. So there's biological sex, and then there's gender, and that's a social construct in the sense that just because...
There's that word again, social construct. No, gender is not a social construct. Gender is a way to label human beings using language. It's not a social construct. It just is what it is. It's a word used to describe something. You can't just take words and say they don't describe those things anymore. Make up a new fucking word. I'll tell you what, make up new words for what you are, and then we'll call you that. But you can't take a word that already exists and say, you know what, that doesn't mean that anymore. We're just going to call it something else. You can't do that. You can't. Well, maybe you can. Let me look who the president is.
Because you're born biologically a female, it doesn't mean you automatically want to vacuum, for instance, which is usually a feminine activity or conflated that way. And so it's this idea of giving children.
Got to rewind that real quick.
In the sense that just because you're born biologically a female, it doesn't mean you automatically want to vacuum, for instance.
No one said any of this. Still, the question has not been answered. She's talking about vacuuming. Hell, it's 2022. You'd be hard pressed to find a woman who can vacuum in America. Do women even still buy vacuums? Is that still a thing? Do they? Because I remember back in the day, they used to have vacuum salesmen that would come to the door and try to sell you a vacuum. They don't even do that shit no more. It's a waste of time.
Which is usually a feminine activity or conflated that way. And so it's this idea of giving children in age-appropriate ways an understanding that that these things aren't set in stone.
And that's how lost she is. Like, women were using vacuums back when she was rolling around with fucking Guns N' Roses. All right, man, let's go.
Gender identity is not tied to biology.
You say that gender's not set in stone.
It's not.
What do you mean?
I mean that's just factually incorrect, saying that. So
again, made up facts. That's just factually incorrect? How?
you have biology is the chromosomal makeup and reproductive organs and all of that. And so that would be sort of the nature side of things. But the nurture side of things is where we see more of gender identities.
She began by saying that my view is extreme. Okay, so the view that every single person on Earth has held up until 15 seconds ago is extreme, and the view that almost everyone does right now still holds as extreme, apparently, according to her. But there is this complete. They are.
She's saying it doesn't make any sense. But as he said, it's the view that virtually every human being has. But now we're supposed to change it because the government reclassified something that was classified as a certain type of issue. Now it's miraculously not an issue anymore, right? And when I say issue, I mean like they used to consider it a mental issue, gender dysphoria. Now that it's not, according to certain aspects of the government or certain influential heads of corporations that are trying to move society in a different way, now it doesn't matter anymore.
Conflating gender and sex, because on one hand they say, well, you got your biological sex, but then your gender is whatever social construct. But then they turn around and say that trans women are women. So a man who identifies with the gender, the social construct of womanhood, actually is a woman. So if you can laugh all you want, but this is a logical problem. You are conflating sex and gender just by saying that. So that's the problem.
You used me, Skinner! You used me!
There's biological sex, and then there is gender identity. Part of me wants to ask why you care so much.
So once again, she repeats the same thing she's been saying all day, which isn't a point, and then she tries to insult him, right? The same people that she's defending, now she's like, why do you care so much? Like, what are you insinuating about this man? Are you trying to say that he may be feeling like, what are you saying? Are you trying to insult him by saying that? Why do you care so much? See, it's these little snarky comments, right? That also show you that there's no basis behind this. These are just people spewing ideas with no basis. Once again, I want to say, this is not to disparage anyone. Whatever you want to do, if you're an adult and you're not under the auspices of your parents' household, do whatever you want to do. But don't push that shit on the rest of us. That's your personal business. Just because it's your personal business doesn't make it my business or anyone else who doesn't want to go with
that. Because it's really not that big of a deal.
Oh, yeah. Can I answer that? I'd love to answer that question. I care.
Hold on.
There's biological sex, and then there is gender identity. Part of me wants to ask why you care so much. Because it's really not that big of a deal.
It's really not that big of a deal, but you're forcing this shit down our kids' minds. You're forcing this shit in our kids' minds in school. If it's not that big of a deal, then don't teach it in school.
Can I answer that? I'd love to answer that question. I care about the truth. So basic truth matters. I want to live in a society where people care about the truth and we're grounded in truth. Right. I care about children, and these insane ideas about gender are being foisted on kids, and that bothers me quite a bit. I care about the women who are having their opportunities stolen from them. I care quite a bit. Yeah.
you are a champion for women. I'm more interested in creating a productive space where we can try to build some kind of an acceptance around other people and exposing children to different ideas around gender identity. I don't think is a problematic thing with parents being involved.
My next guest are parents who say, no way.
All right, we're not going to get to all that. We could sit and watch this shit all day. So